let's see, and then when you, if you're having mail deliverability problems, these are just a couple preferences to check too. This is again in the arms race with the spammers, one thing that people have done is they've, if you try, I mean it's real simple, if you try to send too many messages, it cuts you off. And usually the message is fairly, like the error message is fairly explicit on this. It just says, you know, you sent too many messages. So, Lasso, I think it's 100. Like it makes a connection to an SMTP server and will attempt to send 100 messages. And this option sets how many it will attempt to send. So sometimes, if you dial that back to 50 or 25, it'll stop error messages. And then also in some situations, like if you're behind a NAT firewall or this sort of thing, the IP address, Lasso naturally knows what IP address it's running on, but sometimes the SMTP server actually expects it to be a different IP address. So the override Lasso service IP option in Lasso administration allows you to change that. So if you're behind a firewall and you have an internal IP address, sometimes you need to set this to your external IP address, because Lasso isn't necessarily aware of what that is if you have multiple network ports. Okay, so I'm going to talk about just a few email features. These have probably been tips of the week and things various times. But a big one is email priority. And this is particularly for servers that have a lot of traffic, or and in particular a lot of you're sending a lot of email messages. If you're not sending many email messages, of course they go out very quickly. But sometimes people want to send out like their newsletter, and you may want to send out thousands of newsletters, but you also are sending like error messages to yourself telling you, there's a problem with your server. And so it's like the last thing you want is to send out 10,000 newsletters and then get the message that the server's down. It's like, you just waste a lot of traffic. So you'd like to get the message that the server's down first and fix it, and then send out the newsletter. So it's real simple. As I highlighted at the bottom here, we added a priority feature to the email queue. And so your important notifications you can just mark with priority high. There's also there's kind of a priority normal that most messages go as if they don't have a priority. But when the email queue, when it is looking for messages to send, it pretty obviously it sends high priority messages first, and then it sends like normal priority messages, and then it sends low priority messages. So normally something like a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, it doesn't matter if it comes in a couple hours later. So in this way, you end up getting important things, and the newsletter ends up being delayed. And also, like anything that your customer, like a password reminder kind of thing, I mean, those are generally important. It's like your customer's trying to order something, and you need to send them, close the loop on getting their account registered or something. So those are the kind of things you might mark high priority, so that the customer can check their email immediately and see it. Let's see, and then we have, this was just kind of this was a feature request, but internally, and we also heard from customers, but you've probably, if you've ever signed up for an evaluation copy of Lasso, you receive a sequence of email messages from Harry, I think. And he doesn't actually send any of those messages, they're all sent automatically through Lasso. And anytime you want to do that sort of thing, I mean, it's like it's not real difficult to keep track of all of your customers and have a database and keep track of whether you sent them message 1, message 2, message 3, this sort of thing. But it's like, I mean, that can be a lot of work it's a relatively simple thing. So what we do, we have a 30-day evaluation. We basically want to send a message on day 7, day 14, day 21, day 28. And so we just queue up the messages right when we send an initial email with the download instructions. And at that same time, we queue up multiple messages that are dated for the future. And so this is how, like, this would be 7 days in the future. We set the date, we queue up our message, and this message queued here will just wait in the email queue for 7 days, and then it will send. So it's a real simple thing, but now we don't need to keep track of the state of people who've downloaded our evaluations. We just know that they've downloaded the evaluation and they're going to get the emails out, so many weeks. So then, of course, the problem is not everybody likes the evaluation messages. So Carrie, I'm sorry. So we provide basically an unsubscribe option at the bottom of the email messages saying, please don't email me. And you don't want to annoy the people too much who are evaluating the software. So there are 3 ways to delete these messages that are queued up for the future. The first way is just going in the last administration and deleting that. If you go into your email queue, you'll see them queued up. And if you don't have much volume, you can just go in and delete them. Generally, you want something more automatic than that. So the email queue is a database like any other. It's in the site database, SMTP queue table. So we can go in and, this generally works pretty well. I think this is what we do. You just delete all the messages to that email address. And we're just going to knock out everything that, because we don't want to send them any email anymore. And then if you need something a little more targeted though, you can use email result will give you back a unique kind of token that identifies a particular email message, and you call it immediately after email sent. And then you can store that, like you could store this in a database or something, and then later on you can delete the message explicitly. The ID given back by email results is actually in an ID site column in the SMTP key, which is not the most ideal name for that ID, but it's an extra field, so we went and used it for that purpose. Then just a couple recommendations. I don't usually recommend queuing emails for too far in the future, and this gets back to the same problems you can have if you're obtaining successful messages in the queue. It's like it is a database, and so one example I was thinking of is it's like you must send like a birthday reminder or something to people, like for their address book on your social networking site, and so it's like you schedule 10 years of birthday reminders for all your users or something, and you just end up having all this email in your database. So I'd recommend probably not more than a month in advance. And then for something like the birthday reminders, that would be where, like on the 1st of every month, maybe you queue up the reminders for the next month, kind of thing. And that's probably keeps the email queue to a more manageable size.